I always was of the belief you take yourself as serious as you want people to take you. Bark barbecue manifested itself in my backyard. I used to grill all the time as a hobby. A family member of mine suggested, hey, you should do like a barbecue business. And I just laughed at it because I'm like, what's the big deal about barbecue? So I really didn't know about Central Texas style or just Texas style barbecue at all. Ended up bumping into a video of a very renowned barbecue spot called Franklin's Barbecue in Austin, Texas. Instantly, that's when I was like, wow, this is something that I would love to just, experiment with and see how it is cooking this style of barbecue. What makes Texas barbecue and what makes New York barbecue New York barbecue? Wow, that's a night and day difference. I mean, in its current state, New York barbecue is high-end fast food. I mean, you got to remember, Texas is like we Dominicans like to say it, the campo. That's like down there, that's the country down there. So, um, they're able to do things authentic down there, And here we're more fast paced. You go, you get on your line, you get your brisket, you get your ribs. It's almost as if there's just an assembly line and you just put everything together. A lot of these places don't have salt in them, I think. It's a religion down there. When somebody has something so close to the heart like that, it's gonna be different. The way it's developed, the way it's cooked, the way people see and judge it. First brisket was just horrible, man. It was just really, really bad. I have no culinary background. A lot of our food is comfort food. I felt that smoked barbecue was a very unique method of cooking that's not practiced as much up here as, down south. If Bark Barbecue can change the barbecue culture up here in New York, that would be fantastic too, That'll be something really, really great for New York, period. A lot of our meats that we source out, we make sure we have some of the best meats. If I'm doing barbecue, I gotta make sure that it's authentic and I'm holding it at a high standard, because I feel no matter what, if you're selling something, you're selling a food to a customer, no matter what it is, you have to hold yourself accountable in the terms of the quality that you're gonna be providing. All right, SAS. So right now we're gonna start prepping our proteins. So right here on the pan we have a cut of pork belly. So pork belly we use for our chicharrón. We're gonna slice this into 1.75 inch slabs, and then we're gonna season. So I'll walk you through the whole step. So we're gonna take this off this pan. All right. So when you have this and you lay this out, you want to kind of stretch it out. That way you have even slices when you go through the whole pork belly. And a key thing, always have a very, very sharp knife. So if you have an aligner or sharpener, I would say an aligner better. That way you're not destroying your knife all the time. Right? So like I said, we're gonna do 1.25 inch slices. All right, so then here you go. Right here you have a slab of chicharrón. So this is about 1.25 inches. I eyeballed it, doesn't really have to be exact. So these are really good pieces. So this would be actually one serving that we will give out when customers come and order. Once you have all your pieces ready, right, put the knife away, safety first. What we are gonna do is we're gonna put it skin side up. And we're gonna start with the skin. And the reason why we start with the skin is chicharrón is identified as being a very crunchy piece of meat. So the way you get that crunch on that skin part of the meat is by drying it out. And the way you dry it out is with salt. Salt takes a lot of moisture out. So once you salt it, it'll start taking out the moisture. You'll actually see it starting to sweat. So that's very, very pivotal. I don't use a slather for this. What I use is something called naranja agria. It's a bitter orange. This is something that's quintessential to Dominican style pork belly. This gives it a little bit of bitterness, but also helps a lot with the color. Helps a lot on the color on the skin side. So if you ever see like that orangey, clear, crispy skin, a lot of it comes from this. So you just want to make sure you get that in real good because you want the salt to stick when you're putting the salt on your. Naranja agria is bitter orange. It's a really common fruit out there in DR. We actually ferment it over there, so it's a little bit more potent than what you would find here. There you can actually find the fruit. Here you will find the liquid form of it. So it's a really big difference. But nonetheless, you still get the same results and you use what you have. All right, so once you have this on here and you make sure you've covered all your pieces, we're gonna start seasoning with our table salt. And another tip, when you're doing chicharrón Dominican style, be generous with the salt, all right? Yeah, you wanna make sure you have good coverage. All right, so once you feel you have enough salt on all your slabs, we're gonna let this sit for a little bit, probably 20 minutes, not too long. Just let that salt really penetrate, and then we'll come back and we'll put the rest of our seasoning on it. So we set this on the dry rack. All right, next protein. Okay, spare ribs. Sometimes I like to wear gloves with spare ribs because the cleaning on the spare ribs are a little bit more intimate. We're taking way more than we are on our pork belly like we just did, so want to keep it clean. Difference between these and St. Louis ribs, spare ribs have that spare bone that runs across the top. So what we usually do is we're going to take off this bone that's here on the upper left corner, and then we're going to come across and take out some of this cartilage and meat that runs across on top of the rack. Usually I will use that for rib tips, which is a really good crunchy bite, smoky. I like to call it the pork brisket burn in. So let's get to cleaning these ribs. So make sure your knife is sharp. And what we're gonna start off by doing is there's a little flap on the we call it like the skirt of the pork rib. So we're gonna start off by removing this skirt, and we'll come across here. And there's a lot of good meat on this skirt. So what you could do is you can just accumulate all this meat if you're doing more than just one rack. And what we like to do with it is carnita frita. So we'll just slice it up real good, season it, throw it in the fryer, and then you have some carnita frita. All right, so once you have the skirt removed, I like to start on this side. So we're gonna take this bone out. And there is a sweet spot in taking this bone out. It's gonna be in between the cartilage and the bone, the top part of the bone of these first 3 bones on the rack. But depending on if you're gonna cook this or not, you might want to leave more meat on the bone. That way your ribs are a little bit more meatier and longer. But since we do, like I said, we do cook rib tips, I like some more meat on this end, on the bone end. So we'll usually take this, and like I said, we'll season it up and throw it on the smoker and do rib tips with this. So put that on the side. Now, what we're gonna do is, so you see how we have this thin piece on the right side of our rack? What we're gonna do is we're gonna remove the last bone on this rack, as so. And it seems like a lot of meat, but it's really not. This isn't gonna survive a 6-hour cook, 5-hour cook. So it's better just to remove it and just throw it to the side. Like I said, you could just accumulate all that stuff. Now that we have that first bone removed, what we're gonna do is we're gonna round off this edge and we're gonna come across right here. But we're not gonna take off too much meat because, like I said, we want these ribs to be nice and meaty and long. So we're gonna come around like this. If you have anything else that you wanna basically round off, because you don't want this burning in the smoker, because 5 hours is a long cook for these ribs. There's not that much meat on ribs, so that's why it takes less time than, let's say, a brisket. All right, so then you'll flip it over, meat side up. You wanna see how you have your roundness and everything, and then sometimes on these spare ribs, you have just this fat that's just flapping there, so you just wanna remove that. As so. Boom, round off your edges. Make sure you have nice round edges. That way you get good smoke coverage throughout the whole rack of ribs, and there you go. You have your pork spare ribs nice and trimmed and ready for seasoning. So if you notice, I have 2 bottles of seasoning here. And the first one, which is gonna be the first step, this is gonna be our base. We have 16 mesh black pepper, which is gonna be a very coarse grained black pepper. And then we have coarse kosher salt, and that's gonna be a coarse grained salt. On top of that is basically oregano. So I get imported oregano from the Dominican Republic, and we're really known for having some of the finest oregano trees and everything out there. So our soil is some of the richest out there in the Caribbean. So that's why a lot of stuff is grown out there in the Dominican Republic and exported. So then here we have our more finer grain seasonings. So we have some adobo in here, we have anchote, we have some chili powder, and we have sugar. So I do like to add sugar to a lot of my rubs, even in my brisket. I like to counteract the saltiness with a little bit of sugar. That way, if I go ham on seasoning it a lot, I know I'm gonna be all right. So definitely keep that in mind. All right, so we're gonna come and we're gonna go across with our thicker grain seasoning. And the reason you wanna do salt and pepper first is because they're a thicker grain, and also if you put a top layer first of the finer grain, your thicker grain seasoning is not going to stick to your meat. So always keep that in mind. And also, it's better for your salt. The salt is not going to get lost in the shake bottle if you were to put the finer grain and thicker grain together. So you want a nice even amount going. And a cousin of mine told me the more distance you have in between your shaker and your protein, the more coverage you actually have. So do not come down here. All right, you pat that in. You do not rub it in, just pat it in. That's all you need. And you also notice I really didn't put any type of binder or anything on this, because if you are getting your pork ribs fresh out of the package, they still should have some type of wetness to it. So there shouldn't be any need for that. But if you want to, there's nothing wrong with that. You can do it. But since we're doing so many proteins, the amount of mustard I will need just for binders is just ridiculous. So I'd rather just go straight on with it. So now we're gonna come with our finer grain. Nice even coats, and come back across. Beautiful. We're gonna flip this over now, and we're gonna come across. This is the meat side now, so here you're gonna go just a little bit more heavier. So always remember also when you're seasoning your ribs or any meat, always get your sides, always get your top. So right here, top of the rib, this is a real tasty bite when people are eating their ribs. So you want to get that with some seasoning. You don't want any inch of this rack of ribs to be bland at all. And we're gonna come across. Same way, a little bit heavier than the bone side, all the way across. It smells so good. All right, got a nice even coat, and these ribs are ready for the smoker. All right, back to our pork bellies. So now you can see that the salt's actually penetrated and it had a little while in the walk-in. You see how the skin is starting to sweat. It's releasing a lot of its internal moisture. So now when we cook these things, you're gonna get that nice crispy skin when you raise the temperatures in the smoker at the end of the cook. All right, so now let's season these. I'm gonna lay these on top. All right, now we're gonna come with our coarse grain seasoning, which is our 16 mesh, and our kosher salt, and also our oregano. So now keep in mind you already have salt on the skin, so you don't want to over salt this. So you're gonna lightly season these with the kosher salt seasoning. All right, now we're gonna come with our finer grain seasonings, and like before, we have adobo, we have anchote, dark ancho chili, and that sugar. That sugar is really gonna help in this case because, like I said, we had this in the walk-in box sitting with the table salt on the skin side. So We definitely don't want to over salt this. So we're gonna come on top lightly and evenly. And we're outside, so we're battling the wind out here. So we have our skin side seasoned. Now we're gonna flip them over to the meat side up. And we only put our naranja agria on the skin side, but you know, with gravity, you have it, you know, it drips down to the meat side. So you can see it's really has a lot of moisture to it. So we really don't need any type of binder on these. All the seasoning is gonna bind on its own. So the meat side did not get any type of table salt at all when we were applying it at the very beginning. So here we're gonna be a little bit more generous with our salt, pepper seasoning, all right? Nice, even, generous pass-throughs. So these are very thick cuts of pork belly, so you just want to turn it on its side and just make sure you season the sides of these things. And I'll be completely honest, sometimes you have a bunch of seasoning that's left over on your cutting board or your table. You want to be lazy? Just pass it right over there, and trust me, it'll stick on there. So you see it's good. So the finishing touch, our fine coarse seasoning. All right, so your chicharron slabs are all seasoned, ready to go, and now they're gonna go on the smoker. They're probably gonna take 3-4 hours. On the final hour, what you're gonna do is you're gonna bring your temperatures up to 325, 350, around there, and that way you can crisp up the skin and you'll have a nice, crunchy, crispy skin. All right. My first smoker, I had a $100 smoker. We're talking about thin metal, Coke can level. So it was really, really difficult. I have a 500-gallon smoker and 1,000-gallon smoker. These are both offset smokers. They use convection heat. All the wood goes in one section, and in the smoking chamber, you have all your proteins. So the heat never actually touches the proteins directly. These cookers were fabricated in Georgia by Primitive Pits. They've done an array of smokers for a lot of known barbecue restaurants down there in Texas. So I knew I was in the right hands when I had these fabricated. So on Big Red, which would be the 500-gallon smoker, I can fit about 18 briskets if I were to max it out. On the big one, 1,000-gallon smoker, which we call Hank, I can fit about 35 to 40 if I really pack them in there. A lot of good stuff happening here. You can actually see how when this fat's rendering, how it's just erupting through the top of this fat cap. Yeah, I still have a good way to go. So, one of the most common condiments that you'll find at a barbecue place, and especially here at Bark, is pickled red onions. On these big, rich, fatty meats, you always need a little bit of acidity to cut through that. Our pickled red onions, we slice them really thin, and we do a brine, water brine. So the base of the brine is gonna be water. You have your peppercorn, coriander, and red pepper flakes, and a ton of salt. And we usually toast our peppercorn, coriander, and red pepper flakes in the pot before we add any type of liquid to it. So you might want to toast it, release those flavors out for a quick 4 minutes, and then you add your water into the pot. You're gonna do a 1-to-1 ratio, so it'll be 1 quart water and 1 quart brine. And you let it sit out for a little bit, let it cool down, and then you throw it in your fridge, and they'll be ready to eat the next day. So it's really quick, easy, and some of the most delicious things that you can have with your barbecue. You just want me to have onion breath. It's not barbecue unless you have barbecue sauce, right? Here at Bark, we have 2 types of barbecue sauce. We have our original sauce. So this is our molasses and ketchup-based barbecue. When I was trying to figure out what sauce I was gonna do for Bark barbecue, was it gonna be vinegar-based, ketchup-based, molasses-based? Until I said, you know what, it's gonna be everything-based. So we have some cumin, we have salt, we have pepper, garlic powder, onion powder, paprika, a bunch of chili powders. So it's a lot of flavor packed into this one bottle. To be honest, this sauce is actually the bread and butter of Bark right here. So a lot of people are fans of this sauce. This is a good barbecue sauce for your beef proteins. The mustard sauce is more of a tangy, sweet sauce, and it's really popular down in the Carolinas. So if you ever eat some barbecue down in the Carolinas, their sauces are usually vinegar-based or they have some type of mustard-based sauce down there. This one's really good on all your pork products. So your pulled pork, pork ribs, even on your chicharrón. So this one's pretty well rounded. So those are the main two sauces that we use over here, and you can actually do at home. They're really easy, not much cooking. Just have to simmer the pot until you don't come to a boil, almost a boil, and that's you'll have two different sauces. I believe fire management is one of the most important things when it comes to barbecue. My first advice to anybody that's doing a brisket for the first time or anything, make sure you have the time to cook that brisket. Because if you have to rush through it, that means your fire management is just not going to be there. You're going to want to just do it hot and fast, and you're going to start burning things, and you're not going to get the result you wanted. One thing you always have to keep in mind when you're doing smoked barbecue is a low and slow method. It doesn't really mean low temperature and 24 hours to cook your meat. What it really means is always having a low flame so you can cook at a slow rate. Because the last thing you want is the flames to be really, really high and rushing into your cooking chamber and burning all of your meat. Firewood that we use over here in Bark Barbecue is white oak. For our 1,000-gallon smoker, these size splits are actually very, very good. The smoke chamber is actually really, really big, and there's a lot of protein in there, so the heat exchange, it takes a high temperature actually to bring up the smoking chamber to where you want it to. Let's say you just want to bring your fire up real quick and you want to make sure the split that you're about to put into your firebox is going to catch right. You can always take two splits and bang them together. If you hear that little hollow sound, you know it's a very seasoned and dry wood, and you can just toss it in there and it should take not too long to catch. The seasoning of your wood is really, really important because it determines and dictates how exactly your cook is going to go and how you're going to cook, depending on what type of wood you have. So here we have our pork spare ribs that have been in the smoker for 4 or 5 hours. And as you can see, they have a nice color, they have a great bend, and they look fantastic on the membrane side, nice and cooked. And we also have that pullback on the bone, which you like to see. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna glaze them with some of our mustard sauce. It's sweet and tangy, so it really enhances the pork taste on these ribs. So you're just gonna come, be generous, don't be shy. And want to mop that on there. I mean, another option you have, you can also glaze them while they're still in the smoker and let them cook and actually create a nice little coat on top. A lot of people like that wet rib, so sometimes just, glazing them when they come out is good too as well. Once you mop the entire rack, you're ready to cut into these bad boys. Look at that. All right, so let's cut these. I do like cutting from the top. Gives more of a show, so there you have it. These ribs are ready to eat. Bite straight through, tender, juicy, nice and sweet. Don't get any better than that. That's when you know you cooked a perfectly good rib.
Yeah, that was a good one. That was awesome. That was right.
We have a lot of people, they're weekend warriors. They do their own barbecue, smoke their own meats and stuff. And then we have people who just have no idea what they're about to have, and they're looking at the brisket and asking me, what is that? So, but that's all, we welcome all of that. We don't get any type of way, if you do know, you don't know, we're here to put you on, basically. So this is our chicharron. It's been smoking for about 5 hours in the smoker. So we brought the temperature up to like about 325 so we can crisp up the skin a little bit more. Just so you can get a glimpse or a little listen. That's usually how you want your skin to be. Nice, crispy. So let's cut into one of these. All right. That's what you gotta hear. Take a bite of this. And that's our chicharron. Juicy, crispy, just right. Cooking with fire, it just created this curiosity in me of wanting to really, really understand how is this possible for this meat to be this tender, This is a beef rib, a lot of intermuscular fat, a lot of fatty richness in this meat, and man, I would have to say this is one of the best cuts of barbecue. I gotta take videos of all of you taking a bite. The impact of Bark on New York barbecue won't happen with restaurants that are established now, but the ones that come after. I think that's gonna give birth to people wanting to do things to the highest standard as possible. Not only do I wanna have great barbecue, I wanna have great food, period. Some of the best food in New York. My name is Ruben Santana. I'm owner and pit master of Bark Barbecue. I would like to take a moment and thank the beautiful people at SAS for letting me be a part of their event, and really means a lot to, be acknowledged and, have some recognition basically in my craft. And I do pride myself at being at the top of my craft, so it means a lot. So I hope you guys, came out with a lot from this whole event, and I was able to show you guys a little bit something different than what you're used to. And you can go home and who knows, maybe cook your own brisket now. So you can find us on Instagram at bark_barbecue. We're also on Facebook, Bark Barbecue, and on TikTok, Bark Barbecue.